Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. Creating a budget will keep you on the right financial track. Not having a budget will leave you in financial stress. It's absolutely necessary to take time and truly understand what's coming in and what's going out each month. By taking the time to establish and stick to a budget, you can gain control of your finances and work towards an effective plan that will lead to more financial freedom. Today, I'll be talking about budget basics with Lindsey Curry. Lindsey is the Chief Financial Coaching Officer at Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers. Lindsey and I will be discussing key elements to include in your budget, your emergency savings, budgeting as a couple, and much more. Now, let's get to my interview with Lindsey. Hi, Lindsey. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking to you today and talking about all the things budget basics. We kind of, we talk about budgets a lot on this podcast, but we haven't done one specifically about budgeting. I was looking forward to doing this today. So let's just break it down. What are the key elements to include in your budget, and why is having a budget so important?
Sure, definitely. So I always like to start out when I'm talking to clients and folks about budgets. Our budget sometimes has developed a very negative connotation with it, where it becomes a bad word or it's scary. And one of the things that I always like to tell people when starting to talk about budgeting is that a budget gives you the freedom to say that I'm in control and saying, I know where my money is going to be going each month and how it's going to be spent or saved. And having that control really helps you feel that you can say, I can conquer whatever it is that I'm trying to set these goals that I have for myself each month. And so that's why I always like to share, like, budgets aren't negative. Budgets are a very, very positive thing. We just kind of have to change our mindset to them. And budgets can be used in any stage of your financial journey, whether you're trying to save, whether you're trying to pay off debt, or whether you're just trying to understand what is coming in each month and going out each month. It's just a very good tool to have to help you be in control of your dollars each month.
Yeah, I love how you said it's all about, like, a budget is when you gain control of your finances. I love that because, exactly what you said. It works. It helps you create an effective plan that will lead to more financial freedom. It definitely doesn't have to be, it can feel super restrictive, but that's not what it's supposed to be. So
Exactly.
should you track your spending before you create your budget? And then how does tracking your spending help you mold your budget?
Sure. So I'm going to say, obviously, first and foremost, yes, if you're able to track it ahead of time, it's very helpful because you have a starting point then. However, if this is your first time ever budgeting, I would say it's not necessarily necessary. And why I say that is because I don't want I don't want them to feel like, oh, I can't start budgeting this month because I haven't tracked my spending from the previous months. What I encourage people to do is let's go ahead and jump headfirst in with this. And instead of saying I didn't track my expenses, just grab your last month's bank statement and do what I call a statement autopsy and go through it line item by line item. It kind of helps you understand where you're spending your money and when you're spending your money. So it kind of acts like you're tracking just kind of retroactively, but you're seeing where you spent those dollars, like I said, from the previous month, and maybe even grab the month prior as well, because then that really gives you a good understanding of, like, how much did I spend on groceries, to then give you a goal line item to start working towards. Again, if you haven't tracked your expenses yet, it may be a little eye-opening when you do this practice, because then you are saying, wow, I really am spending more than I thought I was on groceries or gas or fun activities and such. And then that really helps you start to understand what needs to go into your monthly budget, because sometimes then too, you have auto withdrawals that you aren't aware of. And when you're going through that bank statement, you can see that auto withdrawal that you weren't even thinking about, because kind of out of sight, out of mind, you don't see that bill come in each month. Now you have it right there in front of you. You're able to add that into your budget as well. So, like I said, not necessary to track because I don't want them to get hung up on not starting. That starting is the key thing. And we can work with you on getting started if you haven't tracked in the past by using that bank statement, like I said.
Mhm. I was just gonna say, not to cut you off, I was just gonna say, bringing up the auto withdrawal, and like not only are you able to see like, oh, I need a budget for this, maybe you can also see what's being taken out that you might have forgotten about, and you might be like, oh, and then might give you something to say, oh, maybe I can cancel this and save money that way too, right?
Exactly. It's a great way for you to see those things that you forgot about, to
Mhm.
your point. And, or see maybe you have a subscription to
Mhm.
something and you didn't realize maybe you had two subscriptions of it that you
Right.
were paying for accidentally. So to your point, then too, yeah, I can go back through and I can now cancel those things to hopefully save some money. Or you can evaluate those things and be like, I have five streaming services. Do I really
Mhm.
need five streaming services? And maybe over the next month, you take a chance and say, and document, okay, I watch this on this streaming service and this on this streaming service, but I found out on one of the streaming services, I don't even use all that much, all that often. Maybe I can readjust and cancel or postpone this even while I'm trying to meet this financial goal.
Yeah. And, looking at your bank statements will help your overall financial life in addition to help creating your budget.
Yes.
So, what are the important steps for creating a realistic budget that fits your lifestyle? Because every budget is obviously going to be different from person to person.
Yes, exactly. So, what I talk a lot about with budget is that there is no cookie cutter budget because
Mhm.
there is no one person that is cookie cutter to the next.
Mhm.
And just as the months and the years differ, so do your budgets every month. You can have a pretty good starting point and say that these common things always happen every single month in my budget. And that's a great starting point to have and will stay consistent throughout the year for the most part, I would say. But then, like I said, just as the months change for you throughout the year between family birthdays or holidays or one of those one-off things like weddings or
Mhm.
different types of events happening, vacations, whatever the case may be, your months have to adjust to those things that come up as well. So when creating a monthly budget, I always talk about making sure you're taking care of your four walls. And those four walls are your rent or your mortgage because you need somewhere to live,
Mhm.
your utilities because you have to pay your electric or your gas or water bills, things like that. And then you have transportation, so any type of car payments or gasoline or maintenance, and then your groceries because we all need to eat, and your budget has to reflect groceries. So those are your top four things that I always tell folks when working with budgets. Those are the four main criteria pieces. And then from there we start to build up out other items. You mentioned making it realistic, and
Mhm.
so I always tell people you need to make sure your budget works for you, but at the same time, you need to work your budget. And with making it realistic, yeah, sure, everyone wants to save money, correct?
Mhm.
And so maybe you've gone through this statement autopsy and found out that you were spending, we'll say $300 to $400 on groceries, just
Mhm.
throwing some numbers out there. And maybe you say, not groceries, I'm sorry, but eating out. And you say, wow, this is an area I really want to zone in on and kind of taper back. Is it realistic to say I've been spending $300 to $400 on eating out a month and now I'm going to cut it back down to $50? That's not
Mhm.
realistic because you've now taken something that was very common in your everyday life and you've now dropped it back to very rarely. A lot of times when I'm working with budgeting and kind of setting those realistic numbers, I compare myself to a fitness coach sometimes. And I say, if I was your fitness coach and I said, go home and throw everything out of your refrigerator besides kale and carrots, where are you going to be 3 days later from now? You're going to be driving through one of those fast food lines, correct? So the idea of making it realistic is dropping it down in increments where you can actually say, I've accomplished this lowered number and now I have the next goal of lowering that number again and I'm going to accomplish that again. Because going from all in to none in is a really hard concept for us sometimes. And it doesn't necessarily turn out well because then that's when you fall off the wagon and then that's when you feel bad and guilty because you messed up, quote unquote. And we just want people to be successful. So when creating those realistic budgets, I always tell people like focus on those four walls first and then all of your next have to pay type bills. And then for all those like wants, that's where we kind of figure out what is a realistic number for you in that aspect.
Yeah, so slow and steady,
hmm
basically, So that's a way to control some of your excess spending. Do you have any other tips too on controlling excess spending?
So, one of the great ways to control excess spending is, especially in an area that you want to say, like, this is an area of change that I want to make. A lot of times that is with like your fun money, quote unquote. I tell folks a lot of the time to get cash out because when
Mhm.
it's gone, and it's a literal physical reminder of how much you have to spend each month in that area. And so then you can say, I have $50 left and it's the 10th day of the month. I either need to space this out or I can go and do XYZ item tomorrow because I still have $50 and I'm okay with spending so many dollars in this area tomorrow for this activity. That's one way that I always tell
Mhm.
people, and it's kind of the tried and true method of knowing exactly what you have left in that area to help keep you in control.
Cash is definitely, it helps hold you accountable too, because when
hmm
there's nothing left, then that's it. How can you plan on saving money by utilizing your budget? What factors should someone consider when creating a budget that will grow their savings account as well?
When you want to grow a savings account, I've always kind of told people to put it in your budget as a bill to yourself each month because
Mhm.
then it becomes a priority to
Right.
you. If you're trying to create like an emergency fund and you want to make that a priority, put that in right after your four walls. Those four walls, again, being the things that you kind of really need to have dollars allotted to every month to live off of. Make it that next priority level bill and put a dollar amount associated with it each month if you're able to. Even $50 each month is $50 more than last month. I tell folks when
Mhm.
we're working on budget. If you're just trying to build it over time because you don't have debt that you're trying to pay off and you already have a pretty good savings account, but you're just trying to be a better steward with your dollars and trying to keep putting dollars aside each month, at the end of the month, as you've gone through and you've tracked your expenses and you've stayed within your dollars that you've given yourself, if there's anything left over, again, throw that back into your savings account. And I think that those are ways to help you build that savings account, whether it's a priority because it needs to be done soon, or just trying to be, like I said, that good steward of your dollars and kind of just keep repaying yourself back progressively over time is by putting it in at the end of the month.
And a regular savings account is obviously super
hmm
important to account for in your budget, but so is having an emergency account. So,
hmm
how can you incorporate that into your budget and how much you need to save to prepare for a financial emergency?
So, an emergency fund is definitely something that we feel is almost a number one priority,
Hmm.
especially if you're starting out and trying to pay off debt. Not going further into debt is a huge thing to try and not do. So, we always encourage if you are starting out and you do have debt, creating a $1,000 emergency fund for a starter. And
Hmm.
the reason for an $1,000 emergency fund is because it's hopefully going to be a quick number that is attainable to get to over a several months period without making it a huge number like $5,000, $10,000 that you're trying to save for. And the idea of that is it's a smaller number because it is there for those break the glass moments, like your car battery died or you need to pay like an electric bill, or not a monthly electric bill, but like a out of the pocket or out of the normal month
Hmm.
electric bill, like you need to have someone come work on your furnace or something.
Right.
It's something in that kind of criteria where you already worked your budget and you can't find or squeeze any other dollar out of there. And that's when you dip into that emergency fund that month as you're trying to pay off the debt. Once you've paid off debt and you now have a larger emergency fund, again, making that a bill item to yourself to say, like, I need to make it a priority to put at least $100 in there each month so that way I know I have a safety net if and when something were to come up. That's how you can prioritize it.
So, should your emergency savings be kept separate from your checking and investment accounts? And if so, where should we house our emergency savings?
Absolutely. Please, please,
Yeah.
please keep them separate.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's to no one's fault. It's human nature. If
Right.
you see those numbers in there, and if you tend to have a spending little itch every once in a while,
Hmm.
having those dollars in your checking account is just going to tempt you.
Mm,
So having them in a separate account will help you be and stay successful with your saving. But then also, when again trying, if you're trying to pay off debt, it's going to help you not dip into that emergency fund if
mm,
unnecessarily. Again, having that separate from your checking account, whether it's just a lot of banks have just like a savings account
right.
within your account already that you can put dollars in there and they can stay in there. The key to an emergency fund is making sure that it is accessible when you need to get to it in an emergency. If it's tied up somewhere that you aren't able to pull it out very easily, then it's not going to help you in the case of an emergency. And also, if you have an account that is set up where there's a large amount that needs to stay in there, if you were to pull dollars out for like a remaining balance, that's not going to help you also if you only have $1,000 in there and you need to keep $200 or $300 in there, but you have this large emergency, like
Hmm.
it's not going to help you.
Right.
One of the areas that we sometimes suggest to folks is a high yield savings account because they do give you higher rates. A lot of smaller regional banks have really good higher rates and percentages that you could look into for this that would be able to help pay you for leaving your money there essentially.
Right.
And obviously, with it being an emergency fund, the goal is for it just to sit there.
Hmm. Right. Exactly. That's what I was
hopefully,
gonna say.
hopefully, fingers crossed, no emergencies pop
Right.
up. Or if something does, you're able to finagle your monthly budget enough to accommodate that
Right.
emergency that would pop up. But the idea is that once that emergency fund is set, we hope that it just sits there.
Hmm.
And so if you have $1,000 just sitting there with a higher percentage interest rate, you're literally getting paid to leave your money alone.
Hmm.
So why not?
Right. That's what I was gonna say too. Definitely keep it separate from your checking and your savings. So, like, I love a high yield savings account because you do earn interest on the money that's in there, more interest than you would on a regular savings account.
Hmm.
Yeah, high yield savings account is like a great option to house your emergency fund in. Let's go back to talking about budgets. How does your budget change once you have a partner?
Ah, yes. So, budgets, because like I said, not every single person is the same. So their monthly budgets look different as well, right? Well,
Hmm.
not every single person thinks the same way, also. And so having that very open communication with your partner when creating your budget is crucial. And it's crucial for multiple reasons. And like I said, the way that each person thinks and operates might be different. So knowing how to categorize one item in one line item versus the other might be very important as well.
Hmm.
Because you might think of, XYZ items that you just purchased to go under, fun and entertainment, but maybe the other person looks at it as clothing or shopping,
Mm,
and
right.
so how you have things laid out in your budget and understanding of each other of how you're going to label items and what labels or what items that you purchase then go in under those is very important. Outside of just understanding how you're going to set up your budget, talking about what your goals are is super important, whether it's paying off debt or saving, or is there something that you're trying to work towards, like purchasing a home or paying off a car or whatever the case is, just having those talks to help you understand what is our goal that we are working towards. How can we set these realistic expectations for our budgets each month then, and how can we help keep each other accountable throughout the month by knowing that this is what I'm putting into it and this is what you're putting into it, and we both agreed upon how we're going to reach it.
Obviously, when you start budgeting as a couple, you're gonna have to make compromises too.
Mhm.
So, what kind of way? How can couples make compromises with each other?
I think honestly, again, it goes back to being open and having that communication. A lot of the times when a couple comes together for budgeting, we always suggest, especially if someone is like a spender, because typically that's how, couples are.
Mm,
There's a spender and then there's a
right.
saver. Having one of them create the budget and then handing it over to the other partner and having them kind of review it and make edits and changes to it, because then there's buy-in from both sides of the partnership. By creating the budget and then by making edits to it, you guys are seeing what each other is having those priorities set as, and then you that really helps you start those conversations, because maybe your priority was different than the other person's priority. And by having those discussions, you can really see then what you need to maybe adjust when working with your budget and coming to a compromised position. By creating a plan of saying how often we're going to meet and what does that look like? Does that mean that you're putting in numbers for the tracked expenses? Does that mean I'm doing it the next time? Are we meeting once a week, twice a week? Are we meeting once a month, twice a month? Like, have a goal of how often you're going to meet also will help keep you guys accountable, but then also help you understand like what it is that the other partner is looking for you to give to them while working on their budget.
Communication is key in every aspect of a relationship,
Correct.
especially the budget too. So,
Yeah.
other than, communication, what's the best way for couples to get on the same page about money in general?
I think a lot of the ways for them to get onto the same page is really just detailing out and almost like making a list of like what are our goals, what are our priorities, and saying how are we going to accomplish them? Are we going to accomplish them because we're going to be picking up extra hours at work? Are we going
Mhm.
to accomplish them because we're going to try and sell something? Are we able to accomplish them by just saving each month in our monthly budget without necessarily having to give up some of those other things? I think just having you guys get on the same page as far as what are your goals and how you're going
Mhm.
to attain them is really going to help you understand what it is that you guys are looking for and what it is that you want to do. Sometimes you have to have those hard conversations and be open and honest with each other. Just don't brush it under the rug,
Mhm.
because brushing it under the rug is just ignoring it, and it's going to come back up again. Sometimes even the strongest relationship can come out stronger by having those difficult conversations.
Now, going back to just budgeting general, how do you hold yourself accountable to the limits you set? It's like, because it might be not easy, but it can make a budget, but how do you stick to it basically?
So, one of the things that I tell people that is super important with budgeting is tracking your expenses,
Mhm.
because tracking expenses shows if you are staying within those goal items and numbers that you're putting for yourself. I often compare it back to, again, with something that's a little bit more, everyday life. People is, meal planning and meal prepping is such a buzzword right now, right?
Right.
So, very similar with meal prepping and meal prepping. You can make that grocery list. You can go to the grocery store and buy all those grocery items. But if you don't actually make the food that you've listed out and bought, you're not fulfilling the plan, right?
Mhm.
So with a budget, you can go through and you can, figure out what did I spend last month? Okay, here's my new goal for this line item. But if you don't track it, you're not fulfilling the plan. You're not seeing, did
Mhm.
I follow the plan? Did I follow the goal and stay under that number that I set for myself? Because I have no idea if I did or didn't, because I didn't track my numbers.
Mhm.
So tracking your numbers is one of the best ways to help keep yourself accountable. Sometimes that's easier than said than done, right? I think again, kind of going back to what I said with the couples, even if you're an individual working on a monthly budget, set a budget weekly reminder for you. Put it as a phone alarm. Figure out what day of the week, what time of the day is going to work for me to get into my budget. If someone were to tell me, hey, you have to work on your budget Friday nights, I'd say, no, thank you. Friday nights after a week long with, hustle and
Right.
bustle with work and kids, like for me to sit down and like put numbers in of the things that I've spent this week, that's going to be just awful for
Right.
me. I want to sit
Mhm.
on the couch. I want to talk to my husband and have an adult
Right.
conversation, so focus on when is a good time. Maybe Saturday morning, maybe it's
Mhm.
Tuesday morning before you get ready for work.
Mhm.
You grab yourself a cup of coffee, or maybe you like tea in the morning, and give yourself an additional 30 minutes every week to say, I need to go through, I need to see what it was that I spent money on this week, and I need to track it and categorize it within my budget to make sure I'm keeping track of what it is that I'm holding myself accountable for and what I want to make sure I'm setting as priorities.
I love that because, and also once you set that date and you Once you start making it part of your routine, then you really won't skip it. And then you actually will sit down at that time every week. It'll become a habit.
Exactly.
So, what advice would you give someone who is struggling with sticking to their budget?
Give yourself grace.
Mm, yeah.
Budgets can be so overwhelming, especially when you're first starting out. I feel like the first several months of budgeting is really learning and understanding a lot about yourself. You're learning, where do I spend my money? Why did I spend my money? How did I spend my money? When did I spend my money? That's when you can start to see all those data points come into play. And that's when you can say, this is where I want to start making this change. This is how I want to start making this change. I need to start making this change so it doesn't affect me here during this time of year, etc. In really understanding what is your why throughout all of this process. Really just getting to know yourself and your spending habits will really help you start to say, this is the new habit. This is the new lifestyle change that I want to start making for myself to make these financial goals happen.
Give yourself grace, and it takes time to get used to something new. So, Lindsey, thank you for talking about budgets with me today. I know you're a financial coach. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, yes, I am a financial coach. So I do a lot with budgeting, obviously. It's kind of a little thing for me that I like to
Right.
chat about on a daily basis. But also, just helping people understand again, what's coming in each month and what's going out each month. Obviously, a budget is a great tool for you to understand and know how to do that, but really just helping people have an understanding and have a self awareness of that each month. A budget, like I shared earlier, can be done at any stage of your financial journey, whether you're just starting out trying to save an emergency fund, whether you're trying to pay off debt. A budget can help you through all of that because, again, it's knowing what's coming in versus what's going out and how do I make adjustments along the way to make sure I always have dollars left over as much as possible. That's just one of the main things that I always chat with folks with budgeting. And then a lot of it is helping them try and figure out ways that maybe cash isn't working for them. So what can we try to do? What can we try to do to help you be successful? What type of accountability do you need to have from myself or for you? And let's chat about some of these outside of the box ways to help you, reach some of these goals and get to where you want to be.
I will include all the information you need to get in contact with Lindsey in the description of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Lindsey. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great day.
Sticking to a budget can be difficult, especially if it's not a habit you've had in the past. Always keep your goals in mind as they'll help keep you in check. Patience is essential as it will likely take time to adjust to your new budgeting lifestyle. Before you know it, you'll feel the benefits of your budget when you start to make real progress toward your goals. As I mentioned earlier, I will include a link to contact Lindsey through Whitaker-Myers in the description of this podcast. So if you'd like to hear more from Lindsey, you can do so there. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.